bit hesitant to really call this a signal, or at least a strategic signal. And this kind of statement actually is very vague. It doesn't contain any concrete information, for example, conditionality of this kind of threat. So nothing, no positive nor negative inducements that the other side can work with. And I would rather call this a statement that tries to posture, that tries to show a certain threat without, as I mentioned, really outlining what the US should or should not do. And also, if I'm remembering this correctly, this kind of statement or this kind of notion is not new also. I think Kim Jong-un, in his statement at the end of the year of 2019 at a Workers' Party Central Committee's plenary session, he did a big speech, and he was also mentioning that the DPRK doesn't have to abide by itself, impose moratorium, etc. So this notion that the DPRK has done a goodwill gesture of not testing nuclear explosives nor long-range missiles, and that it doesn't have to abide by this goodwill gesture, is there since 2019 at least. It talks about the Politburo meeting giving the instruction of reconsidering to restart the temporarily suspended activities. So a very technical, bureaucratic framing, very interesting way of posturing, but without making it a very direct strategic signal that outlines a clear threat to the US or South Korea. But yeah, it does nevertheless have a sort of bargaining purpose of maybe exerting pressure, or at least suggesting that it has something to bargain with and to increase attention, nevertheless. But at the same time, if I may add that also, I'm also a bit hesitant to ascribe too much meaning to this kind of threat. The timing is interesting. That's clear. A whole month of January, there was seven test events, I think, if I counted correctly, where the US as well as China are both focusing or prioritizing different things. So the US, of course, putting more attention to what's happening in Eastern Europe and with Russia, and China also having other priorities to the Olympic Games during January. But I wouldn't ascribe too much causal effect to these international politics developments and the things that North Korea is doing. I mean, it can frame its missile tests as, linking back to these things, or linking back to US sanctions imposition that was also taking place, or linking it back to South Korean election campaigns that it then catapulted kind of itself onto the political agenda or the political rhetorics in Seoul. I don't ascribe political signaling value to every test event, but rather technical value as well as domestic value also, especially now or since 2 years, where North Korea has isolated its even more as ever before due to the pandemic, and where there are even more humanitarian economic hardships for the population, and where there are also no large-scale winter drills taking place. So maybe these missile tests also have a purpose for mobilization, for consolidating domestic support. We're still in a pandemic situation that the DPRK takes very serious. So I think as long as we have the pandemic ongoing, unfolding, and to whatever degree, the DPRK will simply not join or be interested in any in-person negotiations. And virtual digital negotiations are not something I can imagine with the DPRK, to be honest. And the other dilemma that I see is in North Korea improving and increasing its capabilities And I mean by capabilities, not only its missile technologies, but also the nuclear stockpile that it is amassing, as well as its cyber activities. So North Korea actually has more that it should put on the table, or that the US and North Korea would like to see on the table. But that also means that the North Koreans can ask for more concessions in order to put more on the table. And on the other hand, the US, as well as South Korea and other stakeholders, are not particularly politically willing to put certain concessions that the North is asking for on the table. And the belief or the trust in being able to negotiate and being able to negotiate a deal that is worth something is, I think, simply not there, and I don't see that. And in addition, to make things even worse, I think the DPRK is generally on the back burner, so to say. So the whole issue of weapons development, nuclear weapons and missiles, etc., is in the news, but there's not much. There is political outcry, but there's not much political activities, and I think it's because the U.S. priority is simply elsewhere. Be it now more on Russia, but I think generally the U.S. wanted to prioritize China, containing China, and working with its allies, including South Korea, to contain China in the Indo-Pacific. And I think also, I mean, sure, now in the election campaigns, the South Korean presidential election campaigns, the North has played a role, but I think there are many other topics that are actually much more concerning to the South Korean population. Last year in May, when President Moon Jae-in was in Washington, and it was very interesting for me to see South Korea played a role for sure in China and in the Pacific as well, but there was a catalog of other fields of non-traditional security issues that these two actually want to work on. And I think that's why North Korea is still somewhere on the agenda, but very, very low ranked, so to say. With these in mind, I don't think there will be much positive development, at least for this year. And